A US F-15E Strike Eagle has just gone down inside Iran. And now somewhere in hostile territory, an American airman is running for his life. Not in the sky, not behind a cockpit, but on the ground. Hunted. Because this is no longer just an air war. This is a deadly race, a brutal, unforgiving hunt, where seconds matter, and where the difference between rescue and capture could reshape the entire conflict. One pilot has already been pulled out, but the second is still missing. And Iran knows it. They are scrambling, mobilizing troops, even calling on civilians, offering rewards for his capture. Now US helicopters are flying low over enemy territory. A-10 Warthogs are taking fire. Rescue crews are pushing deep into a non-permissive environment where every second counts and every mistake could be fatal. And what happens next could change everything. Because behind this single-downed jet lies a much bigger question, one that no one in Washington wants to answer yet. Is American air dominance starting to crack? Stay with us, because what we're about to reveal goes far beyond what's being reported. The situation escalated fast, and it escalated violently. According to BBC News reporting on April 4th, a US F-15E Strike Eagle went down over southwestern Iran during active combat operations, marking what could be the first confirmed loss of a manned American fighter jet in this conflict. Now that alone is significant. But what happened next is what turned this into a crisis. Within hours, images began circulating debris scattered across rugged terrain, fragments of a tail fin, with markings linked to the 494th Fighter Squadron, based at RAF Lakenheath. Analysts working with open-source intelligence quickly connected the dots. This was not just any aircraft. This was a frontline dual-role strike fighter, one of the most capable platforms in the US arsenal. And suddenly the narrative shifted, because this wasn't just about a downed jet. It was about the men inside it. 2 crew members, 1 pilot, 1 weapons systems officer. According to CBS News, both had likely ejected before impact, but only one was found. The other vanished into hostile territory. Now think about what that means. Somewhere in the deserts and mountains of southwestern Iran, an American airman is alone, possibly injured, carrying minimal survival gear, equipped with a short-barrel sidearm that is almost useless against organized search teams, and surrounded by an enemy that is not just looking but hunting. Iranian state media didn't hesitate. Within hours, they began broadcasting calls for citizens to report sightings. Rewards were offered. Local populations were encouraged to join the search. This is no longer a battlefield engagement. This is a manhunt. And while Iran scrambles on the ground, the United States is responding with overwhelming urgency from the air. Search and rescue assets were deployed almost immediately. According to military analysts speaking to BBC's Security Brief, the US likely launched a full combat search and rescue, or CSAR operation, one of the most complex and dangerous missions in modern warfare. We're talking about HH-60 Pavehawk helicopters flying low and fast, HC-13 OJ Combat King, 2 aircraft coordinating from above, fighter escorts providing cover, and possibly A-10 Warthogs clearing threats on the ground. But here's the problem. This isn't Iraq, this isn't Afghanistan, this is Iran. A heavily defended airspace layered with threats from radar-guided systems to Manpad's man-portable air defense missiles that can strike aircraft flying at low altitude. The exact kind of altitude rescue helicopters need to operate in. And that danger is not theoretical, because during the rescue attempt, reports emerged that an A-10 Warthog, one of the aircraft providing support, was hit by enemy fire. The pilot managed to eject and was later rescued. But the message was clear. This airspace is contested, and it is deadly. Now let's zoom out for a second. This incident didn't happen in isolation. It comes at a time when the conflict between the United States and Iran has already entered a dangerous phase of escalation. Iran has been launching retaliatory strikes across the region, targeting oil refineries in Kuwait, damaging desalination plants, and hitting critical energy infrastructure in the Gulf. In response, US and allied forces have intensified air operations, conducting daily missions over Iranian territory, including drone interception missions targeting Shahed 136 UAVs. These F-15E jets weren't just flying patrol. They were actively engaged in combat. And according to analysts, they were flying in pairs, often at altitudes where they could intercept incoming drones. but also where they could become vulnerable to ground-based threats. That's where things get complicated. Because while the US has claimed air superiority, the ability to operate freely in enemy airspace, experts are now warning that this term may not fully apply in Iran. As one BBC military analyst explained, air superiority doesn't eliminate all threats, especially not low-altitude threats like manpads. And if that's true, then this shootdown may not be an anomaly. It may be a signal that the battlefield is shifting, a signal that even the most advanced aircraft in the US arsenal are not untouchable, and perhaps most importantly, a signal that what happens next could be even more dangerous. Because right now, this is not just about recovering a missing pilot. This is about credibility. This is about control. And this is about who truly dominates the skies over Iran. But that's just one possibility, because there are other scenarios, far more serious ones, that we need to break down next. Now this is where things start to shift, because what we're seeing here is not just a downed aircraft or a missing pilot. This is a layered military crisis, one that exposes vulnerabilities, triggers escalation pathways, and opens the door to multiple dangerous scenarios. Let's break this down. First scenario: a tactical failure or a warning shot. At first glance, this could be seen as an isolated incident. A single F-15E flying a combat air patrol mission, possibly operating at lower altitude to intercept incoming drones, like the Shahed 136, suddenly becomes vulnerable to ground fire. And that vulnerability matters, because Iran has a massive stockpile of manpads, man-portable air defense systems, small, mobile, and extremely difficult to detect. These systems are designed for exactly this kind of target aircraft, flying low, fast, and focused on another mission. Now think about the flight profile. F-15E Strike Eagles conducting drone interception missions often operate in pairs, scanning for incoming UAVs. Their attention is forward upward, not downward. That creates a window. A small one, but enough. And if a manpad's team is positioned correctly, that's all it takes. One missile, one lock, one hit, and suddenly one of the most advanced aircraft in the world is forced into an emergency ejection. Now, US analysts have been cautious. There's still a possibility of mechanical failure or even friendly fire, which has already happened earlier in the conflict. But the growing consensus based on debris location and timing is pointing toward hostile fire. If that's true, then this isn't just an accident. This is a signal. A signal that Iran's air defense network, even if degraded, is still capable of inflicting damage. Not through large, centralized systems, but through decentralized mobile threats. And that changes the equation. Because now every low-altitude mission becomes a risk calculation. Every helicopter insertion becomes a gamble. And every second over Iranian airspace becomes contested. But here's where things get really serious. Second scenario: the ground war no one talks about. Because once those pilots ejected, the battle moved to the ground. And this is where the real danger begins. Survival Evasion Resistance Escape, SERE doctrine. Every US pilot is trained for this. They know what to do. Move at night. Hide during the day. Avoid populated areas. Use terrain. Limit communication. But theory and reality are two very different things. Southwestern Iran is not a controlled environment. It's rugged. It's unpredictable. And right now it's crawling with search teams. Iranian forces, including elements of the IRGC, have reportedly sealed off large areas. Local civilians have been mobilized. Rewards have been offered. This is not just a military operation anymore. It's a nationwide hunt. And the missing airman? He's out there. Possibly injured. Possibly disoriented. Trying to stay invisible in a landscape that is actively looking for him. Now here's the critical detail. US rescue teams are also tracking him. Every modern ejection system includes a beacon encrypted transmitting location data to friendly forces. That means the US likely knows approximately where he is. But so does Iran. Because even if they can't decrypt the signal, they can triangulate activity. They can track helicopter movements. They can observe patterns. So what you have now is a race. A literal race between two forces moving toward the same target. One trying to extract, the other trying to capture. And in that race, timing is everything. Now imagine this from a tactical perspective. US HH-60 Pave Hawk helicopters flying low, escorted by fighters. HC-13 OJ aircraft coordinating from above, providing refueling and communication. Possibly A-10 Warthogs clearing landing zones. But every one of those assets is vulnerable. We've already seen at least one A-10 take fire during the rescue attempt. That's not a coincidence. That's resistance. That's active engagement. So now every rescue attempt becomes a high-risk insertion into contested territory. And if Iran gets there first, that's not just a captured pilot. That's a strategic disaster. But before we get to that, this is a quick reminder that you're watching the military show. We bring you the full picture, not just the headlines. So hit subscribe to ensure you stay ahead of the curve. Now, let's move to the third scenario. Third scenario, propaganda victory and strategic leverage. If Iran captures the missing airman alive, the implications are massive. First, the optics. A US pilot, one of the most elite military personnel in the world, captured on Iranian soil. Broadcast across state media. Used as a symbol of resistance. That alone would be a blow. But it goes deeper than that. Because in modern warfare, perception is power. Iran doesn't need to win the war militarily to shift the narrative. It just needs moments like this. Moments that create doubt. Doubt about US air superiority. Doubt about operational safety. Doubt about whether the skies are truly controlled. And once that doubt spreads, it affects everything. Allies begin to question. Adversaries become emboldened. And suddenly the balance shifts not on the battlefield, but in the minds of decision makers. Now from a strategic standpoint, a captured pilot becomes leverage. Negotiations, prisoner exchanges, political pressure, even delays in military operations. Because every move now has to consider one question. What happens to the pilot? And that question can slow momentum. It can force caution. It can create hesitation. And in war, hesitation is dangerous. But here's where things get even more complex. Fourth scenario, escalation spiral. Because if the rescue fails, or worse, if the pilot is harmed, the response from the United States would not be passive. We're talking about potential escalation at multiple levels. Increased airstrikes, targeting of IRGC command structures, expanded operations beyond current zones, possibly even a shift in rules of engagement. Now combine that with what's already happening in the region. Iran is striking energy infrastructure across the Gulf, oil refineries, gas processing facilities, desalination plants, over 20 missiles and nearly 50 drones launched in a single 24-hour period, according to regional military reports. And at the same time, global oil prices are surging. Spot prices hitting levels not seen since 2008, around $140 per barrel. That's not just a regional issue. That's global. Because when oil spikes, everything spikes. Transport, food, manufacturing. Inflation follows. And suddenly, a single downed aircraft becomes part of a much larger crisis. Energy security, economic stability, global markets. Now here's the key point. This incident sits at the intersection of all those pressures. Military, political, economic, and that's why it matters. Because what happens next doesn't just affect one pilot. It affects the trajectory of the entire conflict, and possibly the stability of the global system itself. But we're not done yet. Because to understand the full impact, we need to look at what this means long-term. And that's exactly where we're going next. Now step back for a moment and look at the bigger picture, because this is no longer just about one aircraft or even one missing airman. This is about control. This is about perception. And most importantly, this is about momentum. For years, US air power has operated under a simple assumption: dominance. The ability to enter hostile airspace, execute missions with precision, and exit with minimal resistance. That perception has been a cornerstone of deterrence, not just in the Middle East, but globally. But incidents like this, they crack that image, even if only slightly. Because when a platform like the F-15E, a symbol of unmatched capability, goes down inside enemy territory, it sends a message. Not necessarily that the US is weak, but that the battlefield is changing, and changing fast. Iran, despite being technologically outmatched in many areas, is adapting. Not by trying to compete directly with US air power, but by exploiting its edges. Low-altitude vulnerabilities, mobile air defenses, asymmetric tactics, and in this case, it worked. Now, does this mean the United States has lost air superiority? Not even close. The US still maintains overwhelming advantages in surveillance coordination, precision strike capability, and rapid response. The scale and speed of the rescue operation alone proves that. Within hours, multiple assets were deployed deep into hostile territory under fire, executing one of the most complex missions in modern warfare. That's not weakness. That's capability. But here's the reality. Dominance doesn't mean invulnerability. And that distinction matters, because once an adversary proves they can inflict damage, even limited damage, it forces recalibration. It forces commanders to rethink altitude profiles, mission timing, escort requirements. It slows things down. And in a high-tempo conflict, slowing down can shift momentum. Now, from Iran's perspective, this moment is being amplified. State media is already framing it as a victory. Officials are mocking US leadership. Narratives are being constructed around resistance, resilience, and retaliation. And for internal audiences, that matters, because perception fuels morale, and morale sustains conflict. But beneath that surface, there's a different reality. Iran is still under immense pressure. Its infrastructure is being targeted. Its economy is strained. Its air defenses, while still dangerous, are being systematically degraded over time. So what we're seeing is not strength, but reaction. A desperate attempt to turn a tactical moment into a strategic narrative. And that only works if the moment is allowed to grow. Which brings us back to the missing airman. Because everything now hinges on that outcome. If the US successfully extracts him, the narrative flips instantly. What was a vulnerability becomes a demonstration of reach. What looked like a setback becomes a story of resilience, coordination, and precision under pressure. But if Iran gets there first, then the situation changes. Not just militarily, but politically. Suddenly there are new variables. Negotiations, escalation risks, public pressure, and a potential shift in how the conflict is perceived both domestically and internationally. That's why this is more than a rescue mission. This is a test of speed, a test of coordination, and a test of who can control the narrative in real time. Because in modern warfare, it's not just about what happens. It's about who gets there first, and who tells the story. And right now that story is still being written. So the question is no longer just whether the US can dominate the skies. The question is, can it win the race on the ground before Iran turns this into something much bigger? What comes next could define the next phase of this war. To understand how far this conflict could escalate and what the next move might look like, you need to see what happened when US bombers pushed deep into Iranian airspace. Find out more in our video on USB-2, bombers strike deep inside Iran, air defenses collapse. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to the Military Show to see more of our coverage of the US-Iran conflict and the growing crisis in the Strait of Hormuz. And thank you as always for watching.